While the afterlife has been explored in works such as Kyokai no Rine, the cemetery is a setting infrequently visited in the works of Rumiko Takahashi. However, the funerary process has been a part of her works in both Maison Ikkoku, Ranma 1/2, and a number of short stories. These stories will allow us to explore the world of Japanese funerary rituals, along with some of the unique features of Japanese cemeteries and how they differ from what is commonly seen in the West. The funeral process begins with the washing of the body, followed by the wake. One of the first decisions that must be made is when the funeral should take place based upon the 6-day lunar calendar cycle. Tomobiki, a day which means to drag your friends along, is considered a particularly bad day to host a funeral, due to the implication that it would draw attendees to an early demise. This is where the ominous name for the neighborhood where Urusei Atsura is set originally comes from. A wake is the setting for Takahashi's 2002 short story, Akai Hanataba. Mr. Yoshimoto's ghost returns to watch his friends and family gather at his memorial service, and he soon realizes he has squandered his life and did not appreciate his family while he was alive. Setting the scene are all the trappings of a modern memorial, the Otsuya, or all-night vigil. Historically, this vigil served a practical purpose, to ensure that the deceased truly was dead. Now the Otsuya is a step in a long line of traditional ceremonies that must be carried out to ensure the spirit of the dead departs the living world. At the wake, friends and family eat, drink, and pay their respects to the departed. After the guests leave, the family will spend the night in the same room with the departed, who is laying in state in a coffin. We can see some of this reenacted in the live-action adaptation of Akai Hanataba.
笑っちゃいますよ。誕生日忘れてたから何だってんですか。
Here, Mr. Yoshimoto reminisces about his career as a salaryman to an unhearing visitor at his Otsuya. It is only upon hearing the man ask, "Who is this wake for?" that Yoshimoto begins to realize what he has lost by neglecting his friends and family and focusing only on his work life.
それでようやく会社が持ち直したと思ったらリストラ候補笑っちゃうでしょね。
これ誰のおつや？
One funerary feature illustrated in Akai Hanataba. Japanese coffins have a small, openable window where the face is. The window can be opened for guests that would like to look upon the departed and offer any final words. The coffin is packed with dry ice to ensure the body is preserved until it is time for the cremation. In the original manga, the window can be clearly seen. However, in the live-action adaptation, the family simply had an open casket. Another uniquely Japanese aspect of the funeral process is that of Kaimyo. Kaimyo are Japanese names given by a Buddhist priest to the deceased in order to prevent the spirit from returning to the living world when their name is spoken. One aspect of the Kaimyo is that the longer the name, the more the temple charges the family to bestow it. Most of the Kaimyo names are common and written with only a few kanji, but some Kaimyo can cost tremendous amounts and result in a sizable amount of money being paid to the temple responsible for the wake. This financial aspect of funerals is often commented upon as a growing problem in Japan. Money is paid to the temple for a kaimyo, on average about 381,000 yen, or roughly $3,500 US. While guests that attend the funeral give financial offerings themselves, These offerings are called kodin, and they can range from around 3,000 yen to 50,000 yen, roughly 30 to 500 US dollars. On the other hand, the mourning family is expected to use approximately a quarter to a half of the kodin offering of each guest to make their own financial gifts back to the same guest, as well as helping to offset some of the cost of food and liquor for the guest at the wake. Many Japanese have expressed frustration with the expenses associated with funerals, from kaimyo names to cemetery plots, headstones, and the heavy cost involved with holding the wake and the cremation. Temples that profit from selling kaimyo names often cite that this is one of the few sources of revenue to maintain their temple grounds due to declining donations in general. During the wake, Buddhist sutras are read, the guests depart, and the Otsuya, the all-night vigil, continues with only the close family of the deceased remaining behind. After the wake, the body is taken to a crematorium for cremation. The coffin is placed on a tray and burned, leaving behind only the bones. The cremation flame is of a much lower temperature than in the West, where typically the bones are burned to ash. In Japan, the bones are left more intact than in the fine ashen powder of Western crematoriums. In a process known as kotsuage, the gathering of a person's ashes, the family then takes the bones and places them into an urn, starting at the feet and working their way up, so that the corpse is properly oriented feet first in the urn. When moving the bones from the crematorium tray to the urn, the bones are gathered using special elongated chopsticks. Larger, heavy bone fragments may require 2 sets of chopsticks to lift and pass from one relative to another. This is the only time an item is passed between a pair of chopsticks. Doing so during a meal is an extreme faux pas in Japan due to the funerary connotations. The idea that in Japan bone fragments survive the cremation process is important in helping to fully grasp Takahashi's 1988 short story, Hachinonaka. The story deals with Mrs. Tonegawa, a woman who, on the surface, seems abusive towards her mother-in-law in the wake of her husband's death. A neighbor is asked to take care of Mrs. Tonegawa's plants after the mother-in-law passes away. The neighbor soon discovers bone fragments hidden in one of the plants. The mystery of whose bones these are and how they came to be placed in the plant pots is the crux of the story. Ultimately, it is revealed that Mrs. Tonegawa removed the bones of her late husband from his funerary urn after his cremation in order to keep him nearer to her and away from his cruel mother after she was to be interred next to him. Bunkotsu is the distribution of the ashes and bones. The urns containing the deceased's remains are sometimes placed in the home or in a family grave, much as they are in Western culture. One of the most significant cemeteries in Japan is Okunoin Cemetery at Mount Koya, as it is the home of the Shingon sect of Buddhism. As it is such a desirable place to be interred, some Japanese corporations own company plots in Okunoin, and you can have your ashes interred in the corporate grave. Some corporations' grave markers are indicative of their business, such as UCC, Ueshima Coffee Company, and their coffee cup headstone. Others include the company logo emblazoned on a stone, such as Sanki and Komatsu, the Japanese construction company. Another sequence set in a cemetery takes place in Maison Ikkoku. This is one of the series' most memorable scenes, where Godai and Mitaka are arguing in front of the Otonashi family grave, and must hide behind the headstone when the family comes to visit. A few elements draw our eye when we examine the headstone and some of the objects surrounding it. Each tombstone has the family name written upon it. 99% of Japanese deceased are cremated, so bodies are not interred at graves in Japan as they are in the West. If we look closely, behind the Otonashi family grave is one labeled Yamakawa. Surrounding the Yamakawa grave are a number of flat, wooden boards with writing on them. These are called Itatoba. Itatoba, sometimes known as sotoba, have the names of deceased individuals written on them. However, These are not the same names the individual had during their life. Instead, these are the Kaimyo, the expensive Buddhist names that the family paid the temple for. Occasionally, the Itatoba also have inscriptions written in Sanskrit, the written language in which the earliest Buddhist texts were written. Some gravestones are comprised of 5 stones. These are called gorinto, with each stone representing one of the 5 elements associated with Buddhism: earth, water, fire, air, and the void. These types of gravestones are very old, and more modern stones are rectangular, as we see used in the Otonashi family grave. A small stone trough is also placed in front of the grave and filled with water in case the spirits should become thirsty. Small cylinders are also used to hold flowers. In Ranma 1/2, the Saotome family grave is essentially the same as the Otonashi one. Just as with the Otonashi grave, we see no Itatoba associated with it. Needless to say, a hidden lock that reveals a family heirloom is not standard design in Japanese grave markers, as we find with the Saotome grave. While the ceremonies may be different from those in the West, the atmosphere is quite similar. At times somber, at times celebratory, sometimes taxing, sometimes liberating. The grieving process takes all forms, even in Rumik world.